Hey everyone and welcome to Storytime. My name is Jake and today we are going to be looking at the subreddit r/maliciouscompliance. So sit back, relax and enjoy some satisfying stories. There's a reason they have those limits in place, Chad. The big industrial and infrastructure jobs are always an exercise in logistics at a concrete plant. It takes about 40,000 pounds of concrete to fill a standard 10 cubic yard, about 2020 gallons drum. All that material has to be brought in by a semi. To ship 100 yards or 10 mixers, it is going to take about 3 trucks of rock, 4 of sand and 1 powder train. A single job can easily be over 1,000 yards. The biggest I have personally seen was over 5,000, and as much of a nightmare as it sounds. So this night we are running about 2,000 yards on 2 boom pumps. The loads are basically going out back to back, as fast as Bob, the plant manager, can load them. I am not in my truck. I am down in the yard directing traffic. The anthropomorphic personification of Put's Law, commonly known as Chad, had decided that this job is too big to let Bob handle things. Bob has only been with the company for 20 years. He is concerned that the drivers will get confused driving the 100 meters across the yard. So I am out there making sure the material trucks go to the material lane, a large grate in the ground where they can dump rock and sand onto a conveyor belt. The powder trains go down the powder lane, on the opposite side of the plant, where the hoses to pump the cement are, and the mixer drivers go to one of the batch lanes, directly under the big whomping batch plant that they work at every day. Things are fine for the first few hundred yards, but Bob is spending powder faster than the powder trains can unload it. Eventually, the silos run dry, and things slow down to match the unloading rate. This upsets Chad. There are trucks stacked at the job site, but they are starting to dwindle, while the line of empty trucks at the plant starts to extend out into the street. There is a risk of a gap in service. Then we get a reprieve. One of the pumps breaks down, and the rate of work on the job site is cut in half. Bob can slow down enough that the powder trains refill the silos. We even get a couple stacked up and waiting to unload. When we get the word that the second pump is back in action, Bob goes over to the powder lane to tell the drivers that they can start unloading like normal as soon as he finishes loading the next truck. It is at this point that Chad oozes his way over, with all the charm and benign purpose of Sarah Lewis's cesspit. He doesn't want to risk a service gap. He wants the powder trains to start unloading faster, fast enough to match what Bob is sending out. The powder train drivers say they are already unloading as fast as they can. Chad doesn't believe this. He knows the transfer system operates on variable pressure, and the drivers do not operate at the compressor's limit. Cement powder is very fine, and it carries on the air very easily. When delivering cement, air is blasted into the trailer, creating a thick, misanthropic cloud of lung damage and chemical burns. Fortunately, this cloud is trapped inside the trailer, and the only escape is through a hose, and up into the silo. The pumping speed by is dependent on the pressure inside the trailer, so what Chad wants them to do is up the pressure to the point that they are putting in powder at the same speed Bob is pulling it out. The drivers refuse to do it. Company policy limits the maximum pressure they can run at. Chad doesn't care. Those limits are there to keep the silo from getting overfilled. With Bob pulling out powder as fast as he is, there should be enough time to shut it down if the inventory alarm goes off. The drivers still refuse. Then Chad threatens to fire them for delaying such an important job. Bob and the drivers look at each other. Then Bob unlocks the adjacent storeroom and walks away, while the drivers crank up the pressure. When he gets back to the office, Bob tosses me his keys and asks me to move his car over next to mine. Bob normally parks right next to the office, on what is usually the leeward side of the building. I normally park on the east end of the yard. I like it better than the street, but it means my car catches a lot of dust off of the plant. So I move Bob's car and start walking back. By this time, Chad has moved up onto the catwalk above the loading lanes, where he can gaze over his efficient little kingdom like Yertle the turtle. Then, one of the baghouses burps. If you look at that picture of the powder silos, you might notice what look like miniature silos on top of them. Those are the baghouses. Inside each of them are several dozen felt bags, like 4-foot-long windsocks with one end sewn shut. That end is hung from the roof, while the open end is clamped to the holes in the floor, the roof of the main silo. As the air and cement powder is blasted into the silo, those bags act as filters, allowing the air to escape while keeping the cement inside. As best as we can figure, what happened was that the air was being blown into a high enough pressure that it was packing those bags full of powder and restricting the airflow out. There was no alarm because the powder levels were still below the sensor, but the pressure was building up inside. When the pressure finally grew too great, it tore 3 bags, blew open the baghouse door, ripping the lock off in the process, and spewed a mushroom cloud of powder into the air. I am about halfway back across the yard when I see the powder drivers slap their dump valves and dive into the storeroom. A couple seconds later, somebody turns off the moon. A couple seconds after that, the penny drops and I race for the office at a dead sprint. Chad is still up on the catwalk. Chad does not realize what has just happened. Thanks to the massive halogen lamps mounted all over the plant, he does not notice lack of moonlight. He has no clue that directly above him, one of the baghouses is vomiting out darkness like an angry, bilious volcano god. All Chad can see is me running into the office and pulling the doorstep, and the drivers all across the yard in front of him frantically rolling up their windows. And then it hit him. Our plant is on the west side of the yard. This is pretty normal in Southern California because the prevailing winds blow in off the ocean. That means that any dust or powder that escapes the plant blows across our yard and has a chance to settle there before crossing into the neighboring properties. For similar reasons, the baghouse doors open towards the yard. In addition, that means Chad is standing on the east catwalk, so he can look across the bulk of the yard. Finally, that means when falling powder was caught by the Santa Ana winds that had been blowing on and off all night, it got pushed straight back into Chad's face. The stuff came boiling down across the catwalk, hit the ground and flooded out both sides of the loading lane. It was the kind of thing you'd expect to see Dwayne Johnson running away from, a semi-dysfunctional sibling unit in tow, about to learn a valuable lesson about life, love, and or family, while O Fortuna blares over the house speakers. The mess it made was glorious, especially in the break room, which had an open door facing the loading lane. The people inside were ticked. Things could have been much worse. Fortunately, since the powder drivers were expecting it, usually the immediate response to a baghouse failure is for the driver to stand there dumbfounded for a couple seconds, then shut everything down. These guys killed the system in both silos immediately. Still, there was a lot of pressure in the silo, and it doesn't take a lot of powder to make a huge cloud. We also had to run for the rest of the night with the torn bags. I did re-bolt the door closed. After the shift ended, I took a little drive downwind of the plant. There was cement powder in parking lots a half-mile away. Now, in normal circumstances, a blown baghouse is going to cause an investigation, and someone is probably going to be suspended or fired. These were not normal circumstances. AQMD got wind of what happened. The air quality management districts are the boogeymen of the construction industry. If you've ever driven past a construction site, you have probably seen the big signs that say, "If you see dust coming from this project, call," and several phone numbers. One of those numbers is always for AQMD. Usually the last one because the contractor is hoping for a chance to fix things before AQMD shows up. Just arriving on site is enough to completely shut down operations, while a bunch of 300-pound truckers and construction workers peer fearfully through the blinds at a little, white pickup and its 110-pound occupant. The reason for this bowel-voiding fear is that AQMD can levy absolutely stupid high fines. In California, the cap is $1 million per day per violation, though you would basically have to be a Captain Planet villain to actually get a fine that high. Now, AQMD can't prove it was us. Technically, another plant could have blown a baghouse during an overnight delivery, but we were the only plant running a large night job in the area. They know it's us, and that is putting us under greater scrutiny. Corporate doesn't particularly like that, so the investigation gets kicked up a notch. Blame is immediately leveled at the driver whose silo blew. Between him, the other driver, and Bob, however, it soon becomes apparent that he had been forced to violate policy by Chad. More than that, Chad was in charge of the ready mix division, but the powder drivers fell under the authority of the materials division. He had been threatening an employee he had no authority over. Technically, the materials division is a separate company from ready mix. Corporate wasn't about to just fire one of their highest ranking executives, since that would look bad. Instead, Chad was promoted and given a larger office, with a spectacular view of the San Bernardino Mountains. In addition to his duties with the ready mix division, Chad was put in charge of the construction of new facilities. Of course, at the time, the only facility under construction was the new quarry. Unfortunately, the quarry was nowhere near the corporate office, or Chad's house, so his desk was relocated on site. There wasn't anything permanent up at the quarry yet, so Chad's new office was converted from a steel container. It had a corrugated metal awning to keep direct sunlight off the roof, a couple windows cut into the sides, spray-on insulation all over the inside, and a wall-mounted AC unit. It also had a portable toilet planted next to it, because there was no plumbing or on-site water yet. It did, as stated, have an absolutely spectacular view of the mountains, though that would have probably been more enjoyable without all the noise and dust from the construction. To his credit, he lasted 3 whole weeks before deciding it was time to retire. I've got to say that is probably the best way from a corporate standpoint to fire someone without actually firing them. Put them in some awful place with just barely workable working conditions. Yeah, that was good. You must get a doctor's note. I am a grown man and I can tell when I am sick. I know my body a little better than a doctor does in terms of recovery, and if it is something I'm not sure of, I will see a doctor. But my place of work has this silly rule that if you are going to be out 3 days, you have to have a doctor's note. Anyway, I got food poisoning the other day. It was the middle of the night right before I was going to go in, before it started to hit, and I knew what was coming. It was going to be 36 hours of running to the bathroom, followed by 24 hours of being super tired from not having eaten for the last 2 days, and not having any sleep for the last 48 hours. It's a full 3-day recovery for me. The first 36 really are the worst though. So I called in sick on Tuesday and Wednesday, and was going to call in sick on Thursday too to get my much needed rest and to be 100% for work on Friday. I know this was what was going to happen, but when I called in this morning, I was told I have to get a doctor's note to miss this day. It's stupid, because what is the doctor going to tell me that I don't already know? But my doctor also hates these type of rules, so she had my back. I went to her this morning and told her what my work said. She asked if maybe I might have had chills during my time being sick, so I said yes. She said she doesn't feel comfortable saying it was just food poisoning, and is going to say it could have been a stomach flu. She is writing me a note to be out until Monday now. So now I have 2 days of just rest and relaxation, followed by the weekend. Thanks for forcing me to go to the doctor. I'm sorry, but if you're in management and you don't have replacements ready for when someone calls off sick, then you're doing your job wrong. People are gonna be sick, that's just a fact. Hey everyone, I hope you all had a really good day and that you enjoyed that video. If you want to check out some other videos, then click on screen right now, or check out the playlist down below. If you enjoyed that video, then please do leave a like. And if you want to submit your own stories, then you can do so by joining the Discord in the top link in the description. But thank you so much for watching, and I will see you very soon.